So here we are talking about transformation. And I know many of you have been feeling kind of scattered and feeling distracted and feeling like there's so many things that have your attention that you can't quite find the time to sit down, to meditate, to think about God, to read your daily word, to just be. Anybody here experiencing that kind of activity in your life? Yeah. Anybody having trouble with their electronics? I don't know. I just feel like there is something going on in the universe with electronics, and me at least. So here we are with all these things going on, and yet it's important that we find time, that we allow ourselves to know more than all that scattered energy that's out there. So, sometimes men like to go with their wives to shop. And it seems that Noah came home one day and he turned to Eve and he said, "I went shopping for you today and I bought you something new. And you can like it or you can leave it." Would y'all like me to tell that again? You can like it or you can leave it. L-E-A-F. Okay. Sometimes, whoops, wrong direction. Oh, the slides are not in there. Okay. Well, we're just going to change things around a little bit, get this out of our hand, move it over here, and get down to transformation. And this is what transformation is about. It's about making change when change is necessary. It's about finding those places in our hearts, in our minds, in our heads that we need to move across this to over here. Trans means bridge. So we need to bridge a gap. And when we need to bridge that gap, we are in the process of transing. In Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Read that again. That was from the NRSV version of the Bible. Now I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. It's a little bit different. It'll make things a little clearer, I think. So don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. Does that, those two make a little bit of difference? Don't get into the behaviors of the world just because your neighbor is doing it. If it doesn't feel right for your heart, it's not right for you. We have to get into this place of believing our heart and trusting our heart. Ephesians say that the eyes of your heart have been enlightened. The eyes of our heart involve our understanding, which is a function of the mind. And with our understanding, there are eyes, not physical eyes, but the inner mental eyes. These eyes need to be enlightened. These eyes need to be enlightened. This means that your mind and our understanding needs to be transformed, to be renewed. Take a breath. How many of you are feeling a desire to be renewed, a desire to take that deep breath and feel refreshed, renewed, to feel the energy, the spirit, the goodness, the grace of God? We get so tied up in this world, and there's so much more to it than what we like to get tied up in. So spiritual transformation means that we are changing something significant. So we have physical transformation And I have a slide, so I'll invite you to use your imagination. And that is that there's ice, and there's a glass of water, and there's vapor. That's a physical transformation. You have a cube of ice that goes into a glass of water that turns into vapor when heated. Physical transformation. Spiritual transformation, however, is where we have that transformation, and it happens at depth. It happens in the cells of our being. It's where Myrtle Fillmore did her healing work and was healed. It's where we can let go of those old patterns and habits and change. And many of us think, I learned it as a kid, it's a habit, I can't change it. Well, the good news is that we can. The good news is that we can. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So, now that you've visualized the ice, I'm going to invite you to visualize some eggs, some flour, some sugar, some fruit, and I'm going to invite you to mix it all up in your head, pour it into a pan, and put it into the oven. You see, that's the transformation that happens at depth. We've taken some items that we probably wouldn't want alone. We've taken those items, we've mixed them together, and now we have a cake. So we have a sweetness, a transformation into something that we might enjoy more, we may not, but you get the idea. In this particular case, it's about transforming into that beautiful, perfect expression, knowing of the divine. So that's what we're talking about when we're wanting to be renewed. And when we renew our mind, it simply means that we are interpreting life through the lens of God's words and inspiration, that we're interpreting life through the clean lens, not the lens that we have added to with our own experiences. We're getting past our woundedness. We're getting past our trauma. We're getting past the past. And we're allowing ourselves to see the world through the eyes of God, to see the world with a willingness to know God at a deeper depth, to know God through every cell of our being, to trust. You know, they say that when we are in that place of knowing God, that we feel safe and comforted. We feel a trust. It's important for us as we go through life, isn't it? To feel comforted and trust. Feel like you have what you need to get by. You don't have to have it all. Most of us have it all, a lot more than we know or think. Most of us have more than we need. I speak from experience. I've been cleaning out, and I'm telling you, I have a lot more than I need. So transforming the mind means allowing ourselves to see through the Christ mind, the Christ eye that lives within each of us. That place, that space where we can get quiet and we can know the truth. So it's important that we get here because our hearts know the truth. Our hearts connect. Our hearts can lead us in ways that we may not know if we didn't get quiet and listen. If we didn't get quiet and listen to our hearts. So what I'm really talking about is the Trinity. We're talking about the mind, and there's the divine mind. That's God. And then we're talking about an idea that comes into our mind. And it's a divine idea. And then we're talking about creativity. We're talking about putting into action what God has given us. So if God gives you an idea to do something important, to do something that really thrills you, pleases you, listen. It may not be important to the big world, the big screen of the world, but it can be important to you, to the person next door, to one other person. It can be important. So listen. Listen to that still, small voice. So we have major life shifts. We have diseases that we get over. We have death. We have divorces. We have all kinds of things. We lose our job. We get a job. We have a baby or a grandbaby for most of us, or maybe even a great-grandbaby for me. We have those opportunities to have a life shift, and we get to decide how we're going to listen to our higher power to live with that. Spirituality is a process. It's a process that moves us forward. So every time we have a big change in our lives, maybe we feel that there's a lot of chaos, it's letting us know that we can listen and get some good information. We can listen because we know that spirituality is that process that moves us forward and moves us deeper into the knowing and experiencing and living outward God, the good, omnipotent. So spirituality is about connectedness. We want to connect, don't we? We all want to connect. And that's why we're here, to connect with God, to connect with each other, to connect with the divine, that Christ presence within. So here we are, taking the time, the moment to do just that, So I have a friend who, as a young man in college, he was in Israel, and he needed some money, and he was looking on some blackboards, and he saw a job posting. They were looking for 3 young men to sell a boat from something across from Israel to Israel. And if he did not get to Israel, they would have been down in the Saudi area. So he looked at that and he went, 3 of us, that's great, well, I'll do it. So he goes and he applies for the job and they take him. He's a nice, strong young man. And he meets the other 2 people that are going to do this. Now, he doesn't know how to navigate, but he figures they do. And guess what? They didn't know how to navigate. They figured he did. So now they're on a rather large boat sailing across the open sea without skills for navigating. And all they know for sure is that they must get to Israel to get this boat back. That if they don't, they will be going down into an area that's very dangerous. So my friend, being a brilliant young man, decided that he could figure it out. He was studying to be an engineer, so he got out all the papers and the maps, the charts, and he started working on it. And what he realized was that if any time they got off course and started moving to the side, that they would end up in the wrong place. So not only did he have to figure out the course, the direction, but he also had to take into account that undercurrent that would move him along in the boat. So he had figured this out and work against it. You know, when you're flying, they call that the drift, and you drift off like this and you have to make your way back. He didn't know for sure what he was doing, but he kept at it. And he prayed, and he kept at it. And he ended up in Israel. And to this day, he's pretty amazed by it. You know, he was 20 at the time, so he was pretty amazed that he did it. But he knew that he could not let his eyes off Israel. He knew that he must keep his eyes, the map, everything he was working with, on Israel. He could not let go for a minute. Did we ever let go? Did we ever go, oh, I just don't have time right now? I'll think about God, or I'll pray, or I'll do that work I need to do another day. Because we are to keep our eye on God. We are to let ourselves relax in the knowing of God, to be renewed. So when you get tired, what it's really asking you to do is turn to God, to relax, to allow yourself that taking in, that filling up, that starting anew. Now, here's the good news. While we have habits that have perhaps led us to this place, we also have a creator that has created us such that we can make change. We have a mind, a brain, that we can actually create new pathways, neural pathways. We do not have to stay the same. People who have had strokes have proven that they can learn to talk again, walk again. We have seen people over and over use that brain to come to a new place in their lives. We don't have to just stop and say, this is who I am. My parents treated me this way, or didn't treat me this way, or gave me this, or didn't give me this, or this happened to me in junior high, or that happened to me in junior high. We have the ability to change our minds, to recreate the pathways, but it requires us staying focused on that we wish. We have to stay focused on Israel. We have to use all of the tools that we have: meditation, inspirational reading, music, all the different tools that we have that remind us of who we are as expressions of the divine. So we use those tools. So not only do we use our compass to stay on course, but we also use a piece of equipment that we drop down to see what the drift is. And if the drift is 5 knots an hour, then we have to compensate for that. If we're getting overwhelmed here, we may have to stop. If we're doing too much, we may have to look at all those things we're doing and say, wow. Or if we're not doing anything and we're bored and we're spending so much time in our brains that all we're doing is thinking about what we have or don't have, it may be time to get involved, to volunteer yourself somewhere so you can feel energized and loved. There is nothing like service. That is one of the tools that can really transform us. Working with someone else, being there with somebody else, being willing to share your love with someone else. And I know many of you here, and I know many of you here volunteer here. And I know, because you've told me, that it serves you, that you love it, that it may have been one of the first things you did when you got here was start volunteering. And thus you fell in love with the church. You felt like it was home. This is what I'm talking about when I say we renew our minds. That's what I'm talking about when we let go of all that has been to be present to the now. There are all kinds of tools available to us, all kinds of love available to us, all kinds of new opportunities to allow ourselves to be. So we're going to let go of the behaviors. We're not going to copy them. We're not going to look at the customs of the world. We're going to let God transform us into a new person, changing the way we think. There's an expression called constantly negative thinking. You've heard of constant negative thinking? And some of us, I've heard people say to me, well, that's just who I am. That's just the way I think. If I see something, I immediately go to the worst possible thing. I think it's gonna blow up the world because I have a flat tire. Have you ever heard people talk like that? Have a flat tire and the whole world's gonna come to an end. It's important that we keep ourselves out of that constant negative thinking into that positive changing of the mind, renewing of mind, and listening to God. Listening through God, listening to God through the Christ presence that lives within us. Listening for those still small indicators. Somebody came to me the other day and she was like, well, I was going to do this and this and this, but that didn't happen, so I did this. And, well, that must have just been the way it's supposed to be. I'm listening. I'm listening. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. I can get real fixed on my schedule and think it's got to be this way. And if it's not this way, then there's something wrong. But if it's not this way, maybe it's something right. If it's not this way, maybe I better look for the good and find that place. Maybe I better say, thank you, God. Thank you, God, for giving me a different way to see, a different way to be, a different way to love. Y'all believe that? Good. I'm glad. So, really what we're talking about is transformation. Crossing over the bridge from that is not to that is. Well, this is here, and it is presenting itself as it is. But over here is that expression of the Christ. So I invite you to keep your eyes on Israel, to keep your eyes on where you're going, to stay focused, to use your tools, to be in joy, to surround yourself with people like the people that are here, loving you, reminding you of your goodness and grace, reminding you of your tools. So I trust that as you leave here this day, you are going to go out knowing that where you make a left or right turn, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where you get to show how you're going to live and what you've learned here. And today, we're talking of transformation, and it's an opportunity to live it. God bless you.